In that moment, the whole world narrowed to just the two of us. The aroma of roast chicken lingered in the air, but I couldn't taste a thing beyond the bitterness of her words. My daughter-in-law leaned in, lips barely moving, and hissed, "Die like the animal you are." Her words were so venomous and so quiet that no one else heard them, only me. My heart nearly stopped. My blood ran cold. How could the woman I welcomed into my family harbor such hatred? Tears pricked at my eyes, but beneath the shock, anger was rising. Something in me snapped. I slowly turned my head and whispered back, just as softly, "You first." She jolted back, eyes wide. She never expected resistance from me. The shock on her face was almost satisfying, and it would soon be overshadowed by something even more unbelievable. You won't believe what happened next, but let me start from the beginning. I'm a 55-year-old mother, and my life has always revolved around my family. My husband passed away a decade ago, so it's just been me and my only child, my son David. We weren't wealthy by any means. I worked 2 jobs to support us, often skipping meals and new clothes so David never went without. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it to watch him grow into a kind, hard-working man. When David introduced me to his girlfriend, Emily, I was thrilled. I'd always wanted a daughter, and I hoped Emily and I would become close. I went out of my way to make her feel welcome. The first time she came over for dinner, I cooked her favorite dish. David secretly told me what she liked, and even gave her a small family heirloom to show I accepted her. She was polite, though a bit quiet. I figured she was just shy. I remember she called me Mrs. Thompson, despite my urging her to use my first name or call me Mom. I just laughed and thought she was being respectful. Soon enough, David proposed to Emily, and I was overjoyed. I helped with the wedding as much as I could. I baked dozens of cupcakes for the reception and paid for her bridal bouquet and a few other little expenses. On their wedding day, I cried happy tears, feeling like I had gained a daughter in truth. After the honeymoon, I invited them to live with me in the family home so they could save up for a place of their own. The house was too quiet with just me in it, and I loved the idea of having my family under one roof again. I even insisted they take the master bedroom while I moved to the smaller room down the hall. Emily hesitated, saying, "Oh no, I couldn't take your room." But I cheerfully insisted until she agreed. It warmed my heart to imagine future grandchildren running through the halls one day. In those first weeks of living together, everything seemed fine on the surface. We had family dinners, and I gave the newlyweds plenty of privacy. Emily was still a bit reserved around me, but I told myself she just needed time to adjust. I believed that with kindness and patience, we'd become a loving family. Little did I know my kindness wasn't being returned. Beneath Emily's polite smiles, a storm was brewing in our home, one that would soon erupt in ways I couldn't imagine. It didn't take long for cracks to appear in our happy home. At first, I tried to ignore the subtle slights and convince myself I was imagining things, but soon they grew too large to overlook. The first real shock came one night when I overheard Emily on the phone. On my way to the kitchen for water, I caught her hissing in a venomous tone about his mother. She called me pathetic and said she wished I'd just kicked the bucket already. I froze, heart pounding. She was talking about me dying. I retreated to my room, eyes stinging with tears. I barely slept a wink, replaying her words in my head. I tried to convince myself I must have misheard, or that she didn't truly mean it. By morning, I resolved to stay out of her way as much as possible. If I wasn't a bother, maybe she would eventually accept me. Instead, things got worse. Emily's disdain for me became obvious in countless little ways. She dropped the sweet act when it was just the two of us. If I did something thoughtful, she would reject it or twist it. One Sunday, I made my son's favorite pancakes as a surprise breakfast. When Emily saw the spread, she frowned and said, "You should have asked first. We're low carb now." She refused to let David eat any, reminding him of their diet until he sighed and put down his fork. I ended up scraping the uneaten pancakes into the trash, feeling utterly humiliated. Another day, I discovered some of my cherished belongings had been literally tossed out. The porcelain figurines that belonged to my mother, heirlooms I'd displayed for years, were suddenly gone. Panicked, I searched and eventually found them thrown in a box in the garage, some broken. I was heartbroken. Clutching a cracked figurine, I confronted Emily, my voice shaking. Those were my mother's. Why are they out here? She glanced at the box and shrugged. They were dusty and tacky. I was redecorating and didn't think you'd mind, she said coolly. We need the house to look nice for us. It's our home, too. I was stunned at her audacity. My mother gave those to me, I managed, anger and hurt welling up. Emily rolled her eyes. If they're so important, maybe keep them in your room, she replied with a thin smile. No apology. I stood there trembling with rage amid the wreckage of my memories. She treated my family heirlooms like garbage. In that moment, I truly understood how little she thought of me or my feelings. By then, I was raw with stress and walking on eggshells in my own house. I tried to tell my son that I felt unwelcome, but he couldn't or wouldn't see it. He just gave me a hug and said, "It'll get better, Mom." Try not to take it personally. His denial left me feeling utterly alone. I realized I had to rely on myself to deal with this. Then things went from hurtful to terrifying. I started experiencing strange bouts of illness. I'd get suddenly nauseous or dizzy for no reason. At first, I blamed stress or a virus, but I noticed a pattern. These episodes struck right after I consumed something Emily gave me. If she handed me a cup of herbal tea at night, I'd be violently sick by midnight. If she offered me a taste of a new soup or smoothie, I'd be doubled over with stomach pain hours later. Each time she'd cluck with sympathy, saying, "Oh, you poor thing, must be a bug." But I noticed a disturbing glint in her eye that made my stomach flip. After the third coincidence, I couldn't ignore it. One evening, as I drank a cup of tea she prepared, I caught her watching me intently. There was a tiny, satisfied smirk on her lips as I swallowed the last sip. A cold shiver ran through me. I finally allowed myself to consider the unthinkable. Was Emily poisoning me? It was a horrifying thought, but everything pointed to it. The cruelty, the disrespect, and now these mysterious illnesses. I could no longer pretend it was just in my head. My blood ran cold, but instead of despair, a resolve hardened inside me. This was my breaking point. I would not be her victim anymore. I was going to find out the truth and protect myself, no matter what. I was done being afraid. With the awful truth clear in my mind, I knew I had to act quickly and smartly. Running away or confronting Emily without evidence might only worsen things. I needed proof and a plan. The very next morning, I scheduled an appointment with my doctor under the guise of a routine checkup. I described my strange symptoms and asked for a thorough blood test. I also discreetly mentioned that I worried I might have been exposed to something toxic at home. A couple of days later, I sat in the doctor's office as he read the results. He furrowed his brow and said, "We found traces of a toxin in your system, something commonly found in pesticides or rat poison. Have you been around any chemicals?" Despite expecting this, my heart sank. The confirmation was chilling. I was being poisoned. I left the clinic with the test report clutched in my hand, my body shaking, partly from fear, partly from a burgeoning resolve. Now I had solid proof of what Emily was doing. On the drive home, I allowed myself a few moments to feel the shock and betrayal. My daughter-in-law, whom I had welcomed with open arms, was secretly trying to kill me. The hurt was deep, but as I pulled into my driveway, another feeling took over: determination. Emily thought of me as weak and easy prey. She was banking on my silence and compliance, but I was done being the victim. I was going to fight back, carefully and intelligently, and give her the surprise of her life. Over the next day, I set my plan into motion quietly. First, I kept that doctor's report and even saved a sample of the herbal tea she'd last given me, storing it as evidence. Most importantly, I continued to play the part of the oblivious, feeble mother-in-law. I complained of headaches and fatigue, moving around the house with my shoulders slumped. I wanted Emily to believe I was still clueless and growing weaker by the day. In truth, I was watching her every move and waiting for the perfect moment to spring my trap. That moment came sooner than I anticipated. One afternoon, I deliberately massaged my temples and sank into the couch, sighing as if in pain. Right on cue, Emily noticed. Her eyes lit up in a way that made my skin crawl. "Another headache, Mom?" "You poor thing," she said, trying to sound concerned, but barely hiding her eagerness. "Let me make you a cup of my special herbal tea. It will help." I gave her a weak nod. "Thank you, dear," I whispered, mustering a grateful smile. My heart was thudding in my chest, but I kept my outward demeanor limp and exhausted. As soon as she turned away, I quietly followed her toward the kitchen, staying out of sight. My hands trembled. Not from illness this time, but from adrenaline. Peeking around the doorway, I watched Emily prepare my medicine. She thought she was alone. My stomach turned as I saw her pull out a small tin from the back of the pantry and open it. Using a tiny spoon, she measured a dose of some fine powder and stirred it into a steaming cup of tea. Even from afar, I caught a whiff of a sharp, bitter scent. A wave of nausea hit me, not from the poison itself, but from the horror of seeing her do it so calmly. She was really doing this again. I took a silent, steady breath. This was it. The moment I'd been preparing for. The trap was set, and I was seconds away from springing it. My fear melted away, replaced by cold resolve. I stepped silently into the kitchen doorway, ready to make my move. Steeling myself, I made the switch in a split second while Emily's back was turned. The poison cup she had prepared for me was now in her spot, and my safe cup sat where she'd think it was hers. Oblivious, Emily carried the tray into the living room. She handed me the teacup that was in fact harmless and kept the poisoned one for herself, likely with no intention of truly drinking it. My heart hammered, but I remained outwardly frail and grateful. We sat across from each other, teacups in hand. Emily watched me like a hawk as I raised the cup to my lips. I blew on the tea and took a small sip for show. Satisfied that her plan was in motion, she allowed herself a tiny taste of her own cup. I gently set my cup down, my hands steady. This was the final moment. Emily leaned toward me as if to offer a comforting word, but instead she whispered, full of venom, "Die like the animal you are." I felt a surge of calm fury. I met her gaze, leaned in close, and whispered back, "You first." For a split second, Emily's smug expression faltered. Confusion flickered in her eyes, quickly replaced by alarm. She opened her mouth to respond, but a sudden, violent cramp cut her off. What? She wheezed, a hand flying to her stomach. The teacup slipped from her, fingers, and shattered on the floor, dark poison tea spreading across the carpet. She staggered to her feet, knocking the coffee table askew. "What did you do?" she cried out, her voice breaking with panic as the realization hit her. I stood up as calmly as I could, watching her plan backfire. Emily's face turned ashen. She tried to lunge toward me, but her legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, then onto her side, gasping for breath. Her eyes were wide with terror now. The poison was doing its work swiftly. She'd never anticipated this outcome, that she would fall victim to her own cruelty. At that moment, the front door swung open. My son, David, burst in, alarmed by the noises. He took in the scene with horror, his wife writhing on the floor and me standing over her. "Mom, Emily!" he yelled, dropping to Emily's side. He cradled her, his voice high with panic. "What happened? What's wrong?" Tears sprang to my eyes as the adrenaline and emotion of the moment crashed over me. "Call an ambulance," I shouted, grabbing the phone myself. As he fumbled for his phone, I knelt beside him. In a shaking voice, I managed to say, "David, she was poisoning me." I switched the cups. "The poison, it's in her tea." My words tumbled out in sobs. He stared at me in disbelief, then down at the broken teacup and the puddle of tea that emitted a harsh, chemical odor. Understanding slowly dawned on his face as he pieced together the signs he'd missed. With trembling hands, he called 911, voice cracking as he begged for help. Within minutes, paramedics arrived. They tried everything, but it was too late. The dose Emily had meant for me had already sealed her fate. As the EMTs shook their heads and radioed in that there was nothing more to be done, my son let out a fractured sob. Emily lay motionless, the ordeal over at a terrible cost. David knelt there in shock, tears streaming down his face. He looked up at me, anguish and guilt flooding his eyes. "Mom, oh God, I'm so sorry," he choked out, reaching for me. I pulled him into my arms and we clung to each other tightly on the living room floor amid shattered porcelain and spilt secrets. He now knew the truth of what I had endured and of what his wife had done. We both did. The nightmare was finally over, but our lives had been irrevocably changed in those few harrowing moments. In the aftermath, authorities ruled my actions as self-defense, and I faced no charges. That legal outcome was a relief amid the heartbreak. My son was devastated with guilt. He apologized over and over for not seeing what was happening, but I never blamed him. Neither of us wanted to believe someone we loved could be so cruel. We leaned on each other and slowly began to heal. The ordeal, horrific as it was, ultimately brought us closer. As for me, I never wanted things to end this way. I'd hoped for a loving daughter-in-law, not someone who would try to harm me. It took time to accept how tragically things turned out. I don't feel guilty for protecting myself. I did what I had to do. But it's still sad that our family was shattered by this. Day by day, the nightmare loses its hold. The house is peaceful again, if emptier, and I am learning to find comfort in that peace. I learned that suffering in silence in the face of abuse only allows evil to fester. Sometimes you have to stand up and fight, even when it's terrifying. The kindness and patience I always tried to live by are virtues, but they needed to be paired with courage. I found strength inside me that I never knew I had until I was truly tested. In the end, Emily's cruelty became her own undoing. She fell victim to the trap she set for me. And what she thought was my weakness turned out to be my greatest strength once I finally stood up for myself. I survived with my life, my family, and my dignity intact. Never again will I allow anyone to abuse my kindness or make me feel less than human. Sometimes good people do suffer at the hands of the wicked, but if you hold on to the truth and find the courage to stand up, eventually justice prevails, even in the most unlikely circumstances. In our case, love, truth, and self-respect ultimately triumphed over cruelty.